The following is a collection of discussions conducted 10 days after the Russian invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, featuring 3 young Georgians interviewed in a hotel room next to the Georgian parliament, in front of which people are protesting against their government's inaction in the face of the crisis. Shota, Giorgi and Nicholoz discuss the Georgian experience in war and corruption tied to Russia, the situation in Ukraine, and the possible futures for countries like Georgia and Ukraine. Listening to the 3 young men gave us an increased understanding of life overshadowed by post-Soviet history and current Russian influence. Especially insightful was their description of what it's like to try and move forward as a nation when you're treated as a pawn in a game played by forces magnitude stronger than you. We include our own knowledge, where it adds context to the messages voiced, but many events in the history of modern Georgia are still clouded in mystery, with little factual evidence available. You can watch or listen to each of these interviews in full length on our YouTube channel or on the Hilden and Kaira podcast, found on all major streaming platforms. Links to each are in the description.
My name is Shota Samkharadze. I am 30 years old. I am from Tbilisi. I was born and raised in Tbilisi. And I am from region of Imereti. Worked for around 6 or 7 years, I believe, in the environmental protection field in Georgia. In which time I have gone around and been to every single part of my country many times, and I feel incredibly connected to the land and to the people that are inhabiting it. Yeah.
So hello, my name is Giorgi I'm from Tbilisi, Georgia. I'm 24 years old. I have a bachelor's degree in international relations and the master's degree is also in international relations. So living in Tbilisi, trying to be active member of the Georgian society and try to be involved in the decision making of my country. Okay. They say youth activist.
Okay.
My name is Nicholoz. I'm local. I'm from Tbilisi, half from Tbilisi, half from Batumi. I'm 26. I'm currently a video editor, sort of filmmaker, sort of game developer. I kind of try to do many different things.
Armed conflicts between Russia and its neighboring countries are not exactly new. In Georgia, shortly after its independence during the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, a civil war broke out, where the allegedly Soviet and later Russian-backed groups within South Ossetia and Abkhazia fought against the new government. After NATO implied that Georgia and Ukraine could begin to join the alliance, Russia in 2008 answered with direct military aggression. Under the pretense of liberation, Russian troops took control of these regions in 5 days and have held them since.
I was 12 in 2008, and when it happened, just one morning I walk out, I'm in Batumi, and my dad just goes, "They're bombing Gori." He didn't even have to say who, because who else would it be? So for me, as someone who went through that at the time, it was just, they're invading us. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. I don't know when it will end. I don't know if it will end. Fortunately, it did when it did. But there's a lot of misinformation about the 5-day war because at the time, the states were busy in the Middle East. So since that was taking the center stage on like the international news media, Russia taking a small bite out of a country that most people haven't even heard of wasn't in it just news in any capacity. So it's a military strategy that has been repeated time and time again with us, because you annex a region, then you say that you are the only country apart from someone in the oceanics. I don't know why they're even like involved in this, but you annex a region, then you say that, oh, we are peacekeepers and we have to place our military force there in order for not to spark conflict, and then they spark conflict and blame it on the other party. Because we don't benefit anything from a military conflict. We just want to, be.
You have to understand that at that time, me and a lot of, my aged people that are now standing out here, we were 15, 16. We were very much in this kind of dark. And this was one of the first kind of instances of war of this, what they now call this modern hybrid war of information. So it's all a little bit fuzzy, sometimes. But I remember that we had soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, that came over here and fought for us. I remember that there was also talk of officially sanctioned, government-sanctioned helicopters, I believe it was, that the Ukrainian government sent over, but under wraps, so that not to,
Let's provoke.
Exactly, not to provoke the Russian government. So, does that answer your question? I'm sorry, I got a little bit lost in the answer.
You see, there is no peacekeeper which is Russian. Okay, so this is a sentiment which I'm using a lot. Russian can be a peacekeeper in the conflict which he is starting. Okay, with the country starting the war, they cannot be the peacekeepers. So what happened in 2008 in Georgia, in the region of Samachablo, is that Russian troops came into the Georgian territory. We were trying to defend ourselves, but Russians sent more and more troops to occupy our territories and to send to these two regions to give them independence. So Russia is the aggressor. Georgia's total area is 69,000 kilometers and Russia is 17 million. One of the strongest army in the world. It will be unfair if Georgians started war against Russia. So I believe Russians are aggressors. Same is happening in Georgia, what is happening right now in Ukraine.
Okay.
We arrived in Georgia on the 9th day of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. While publicly seeking to join the European Union, the government had declared neutrality in the ongoing conflict. The ruling party, Georgian Dream, has led the government's response in refusing to join Western sanctions, with the Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili stating they would only damage our country and populace more. The government is also making it increasingly difficult for volunteers to help. Ukrainian authorities have claimed the Georgian government is blocking flights from Tbilisi to Poland with volunteers on board. The government's response had triggered massive peaceful protests in support of Ukraine and against the Georgian government, the root symptoms of which we wanted to hear and learn more about.
I don't even have the words really to express myself. It's a shameful response, because if we're really kind of cool-minded about this and logical and taking everything into account, like I said, there's very little of us population-wise, and we have Russian soldiers on our land in battle-ready conditions. And it would not take much, really, for them to just come in and take over and just completely destroy us, really. Or at least as much as they want. So there is a sophisticated kind of argument to be had about how much we want to make this situation even more tense. There is, really, because things are never that simple. However, that does not change the fact that when we were in these situations, like I said before, one of the only peoples that have stood by us were the Ukrainians. And the way I see it, and the way a lot of my compatriots see it, those that stand there every day, is that we have a debt, and a debt that you cannot kind of forget or forego, just because it is, hard for you to maybe pay the price. It's understandable what the price would be, but it's also necessary to be, true to our word and true to our identity at this time.
I feel very ashamed because when you see a people that are supposed to be your, let's say, comrades in misery, because you go through the same kind of, I don't know how to put it, the same trials and tribulations, basically. The expectation for us as a people is to, we have the common enemy, and even if we didn't have that common enemy right now, we still have like a relationship. We're still cool with each other. So when the government just speaks out on a level where it would have been better if they kept their mouth shut, it's fucked, You just, every time someone from the higher ups opens their mouth, it gets worse.
Sometimes the government will not interface the real face of the population. Everybody in Georgia is supporting Ukraine, and what the government is doing right now, it's not good because they don't know how to respond on this issue and on these topics. When there was war in 1991 in Abkhazia and 1992 in South Ossetia, the Ukrainian friends were with us all the time. In 2008, Ukrainians were standing with us. We need to be right now with Ukraine because we are stronger together. And even the motto of our country is strength is in unity. So if we will be united, we're going to do everything good. But right now, the government's response is terrible.
It does not represent you.
It doesn't represent not me, not the Georgian society, not everybody, nobody in this country.
I feel a lot of the times personally, responsible for this because this is not a matter of we should do something about this government now. This is a matter of we should have done something about this government a long time ago. So that now, because for a lot of the realistic processes that would genuinely have let us get either another government or some kind of structures that would have allowed us to make sure that this help that we want to send to Ukraine would happen, those would need time, right? And we don't have that time now. And that's what I'm angry about. That, yeah, we stood against our government many times before this, and we tried to voice out our concerns and our outrage, but it was not enough.
The military support from the Georgian side is already in the Ukraine. So a lot of the Georgian legionnaires are in the Ukraine as a Georgian National League in the Ukraine. So we are always fighting together. Okay, a lot of Georgians are in the Ukraine. Even the president's first helper in the negotiation is Georgian right now with Russia. So Georgians and Ukrainians, we are always together. Okay, if we cannot help we cannot send the full military support in Ukraine, it's understandable because it means that we are going to declare the war to the Russia. But a lot of people, a lot of volunteers are going to Ukraine to help the people. We are sending a lot of humanitarian things to the Ukraine. Right now, if you're going to go to the parliament, you're going to see that there are a lot of packages which every day is sent to the Ukraine. And a lot of companies, a lot of things are helping. Even the incomes which they are receiving, they are sending to the Ukraine. So there is right now some campaign like this. If the Ukrainian people will come to Georgia, all the hotels, all the apartments, it's free for them. Okay, so we are trying to do everything what we can, but this is really small steps to them. We need to do even more because when we were fighting against Russians, Ukrainians were next to us all the time.
The issue of corruption is one often tied to many post-Soviet countries. Arguably not least because of the power it offers the Russian government to influence the decision-making processes in its neighboring countries.
When going deep into the topic of Georgia, a name that is bound to come up, especially with Georgian Dream, the current ruling party of Georgia, is Bidzina Ivanishvili. Bidzina Ivanishvili, he is, let's say, the funding head of the ruling party of Georgia, and he has his business tied in Russia. Would that be a fair connection or a fair narrative that would describe why they would want to protect their interests and their relationship with Russia? Or is that a far-fetched, let's say, catch?
It is not at all a far-fetched catch. I think that anyone who knows anything about how money is made in Russia, about how oligarchs make their money in Russia, not even delving deep to how Vladimir Putin came to power by the help of these oligarchs, or the previous oligarchs at least that were there. But if you know even a little bit about what kind of ties to the government you have to make that kind of money in Russia, I think it's incredibly easy to connect the dots there and see where the influence is coming from. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
From 2008, from 2006, when the main conflicts already arrived in Georgian territory, Georgian government decided to not be involved in the Russian market like Mole. So we were having the really good relations with the European Union, with the United States and all other countries, especially in Asia as well. But since the new government came from 2012, all of our population and all of our goods are going to Russia. This is a case which for all of the Georgian people is really bad. We want to go out from Russian market to be involved more in European Union, more to Turkey, to the Arabic countries. Okay, so this is the idea for Georgia. We want to have some relations, but till the Georgian territories and till the territories of the Ukraine and the Moldova will be occupied, we cannot have the proper relations with the occupier. The influence of the Russian politics and the Russian interest in Georgia is really high. We are fighting against it, but you're gonna see that Russia is bigger than us. They have really big soft power involved in Georgian politics. A lot of Georgian political parties, a lot of the TV stations, radios, newspapers are still pro-Russian. Okay, so the funding is the main key why right now Russia is controlling much of interest and the politics in Georgia. But people are fighting against us, like me, you, and everybody who is living in Georgia, who is US, who is understanding what is happening right now. We are fighting against it, but Russia has a really big interest with us.
Obviously, because they have to maintain their domestic interests.
They want to see authoritarian countries near its borders, because the domino effect of the democratic countries will eventually overthrow the government in Russia. So if Georgia, Ukraine, Baltic states, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan will be the democratic countries, it's going to overthrow the ruling party of United Russia in Federation.
Okay.
I think the fact that every year the government gives us a reason to go out 100 meters from here and just stand in the street in the cold, in the warm, rain, snow, doesn't matter. Just because if they give us a reason every year, that means they're not doing something the way they should. There's always this sensation that instead of working for the people, with the people, they're working with Russia against the people. And that's never going to end well. Because at a certain point, we will hit the tipping point and just something's going to happen.
The distinction between nation, culture, and government is apparent especially in the Georgian sentiment towards Russians as a people. When filming this material, we were often mistaken for Russian journalists and asked for a proof of identity, after which the tension was eased and we were welcomed in. There is an understanding of common humanity, but the Russian question in Georgia is understandably problematic.
I don't know even how to say, but you would expect them to understand that they are they're guests in this country that is suffering from their government, and we are still letting them in. We are letting them see all our beautiful sights, eat all the tasty food that we have to offer. But there are bad actors always, and you see them always. They stand out more, I guess. So they kind of provoke more. For example, I can bring a specific example if you would like. I was in Gudauri skiing in the mountains when I heard that the war broke out in Ukraine. And I was sitting and eating, taking a break, and I looked up and I saw some people, Russian tourists, and one of them was wearing a ski jacket, national Russian ski jacket that had Russia written on it and had the Russian flag on it. Now you see, that's what I'm talking about. When you're in one country that is invaded currently by your soldiers, which is next to another country that is now starting to get invaded by your soldiers, in my mind, you shouldn't walk around wearing your national colors so, flashily, or whatever you want to say. So that's what I mean. In general, and this might be like a cliche way of saying it, in general, I have friends who are Russian, and I have no problem with them at all. We're a modern society. We understand people are people. We're good with them. It's really nothing personal. But when you see, for example, now the next problem we're facing now here is the mass immigration of Russians to Georgia, which is a big problem because there's 3 million of us, by optimistic count, I believe, I don't know. And there's 145 to 150 million Russians. So it would take 2% of Russians to come here to overpopulate us, to be more than us here. So we're afraid of that, especially when you take into account that every time the Russian government has invaded a country next to them, it has been, quote unquote, to protect their citizens that are in that country. It was the same with us, it's same with Ukraine. So we see this and we can see where this is going. So that's the worry in terms of people. My worry is that instead of staying at home and dealing with the consequences that the world is placing on them so that they can deal with their own problems, they're running away to countries like Georgia and making us deal with their consequences. And additionally, I think it's incredibly folly and it's very poorly thought out of the people, because if they're running from the Russian government to Georgia, they're not running far enough.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents on that.
Okay.
Look, Russian people are good. Personally, for me, Russian culture, Russian literature, music, cuisine is amazing. We cannot say that Russian government is representing the Russian population. Same goes to Georgia, you see. So Russians are really good. Okay, we're having a really good relations with the Russians for a lot of centuries. Even the Ukrainians and Russians, they're calling Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, it's called three sisters. In Russian. So their countries with culturally really near to each other. And Georgians and Russians, we are getting really along with each other all the time. We are having a lot of Russian tourist students in our country. And we cannot say anything bad about Russian people. But Russian government...
Okay, because right now there's a growing sentiment here in Georgia to not allow Russians to come because a lot of narratives say that, Russians are coming, they're occupying the country, they're buying all the areas. Do you have any comments on that?
If we cannot fully understand if those people who are coming into our country are occupiers. If they are really running from the Putin's regime, from Russian Federation, we need to accept them. Okay, if some people are running away from their countries because they are persecuted or they will be in the jails, of course, as a democratic society, we need to accept them and we need to try all the best what we can do. But there is outrage that some of the spies and some of the Russian military groups may also enter the Georgia. This is why the disputes are in Georgian society right now.
I know inherently we are not an aggressive nation, because it's basically in the Bible for us that a guest is a gift from God. They need to be treated as such. But when your guest is, instead of sharing in what you have when the guest is taking, then we don't tolerate taking like that. We tolerate giving, but we're not giving Russia anything.
Continuing to create and support the breakaway regions is convenient for Russia, because their existence questions the very basis of statehood, territorial sovereignty, which in turn poses problems for cooperation and integration between Georgia and Ukraine and the West, namely joining NATO and possibly even the EU. While the future looks dreadfully uncertain for countries and nations that still see their everyday life overshadowed by Soviet past, a clear feeling arises from the way Georgian activists handled the situation. A shared trauma from the near past reminds everyone of a time no one wishes to return to, in a way offering a direction. From the unity shown by protesters of all ages, as well as the activism in both soft and hard assistance to Ukraine, we can get a glimpse of the hope and energy nested in the hearts of these people, working together towards a better future.
We have always been the threshold between Europe and Asia, and I think it's fair to say that we are in equal parts both and neither, because we're smack dab in the middle and we take enough from both sides of the planet or the continent where we can be considered part of both and influenced by both. But I still feel that we are kind of going towards more the European side of things. And same with, and Ukraine is it's Eastern Europe. You can't just get away with that. Same with Moldova. And joining with NATO or EU would be cause for a lot of change within the country, because you need to evolve and step over certain prideful aspects that people may have to kind of compromise and play by the terms of the alliance. But that also means security against who. That means an easier way for the people to develop, to educate themselves, to see more of the world, and just be more united with everyone else.
Mm-hmm. So I believe we're the emerging European democracy, which needs to have more interest from the EU. If we're going to have more relations with the European Union countries, we will be much more democratic, and we're going to see and we're going to understand more what we can do with our lives. So joining the EU is the best opportunity for Georgia to become a good country. A better country, yeah.
Better education, better
everything.
Learning opportunities, more liberal.
Yes, of course. So, the idea of the Georgia is to be I'm calling it European democracy. So we want to have the liberal values implemented in everywhere. We are trying to do it, but still we need some help from somebody, because we are doing it on our own. Mm-hmm. So if we're gonna receive some help from the different countries, it will be better for us. Mm-hmm. If you want me to be honest with you.
Yeah, no.
90% of the Georgians want to join you. Even the most orthodox people in this country, they are pro-European Union. The values, the ideas may seem they're same, okay? We are having some disputes, but these disputes are easily to handle. But majority of the people, majority of the society is willing to join the EU, and I believe we are going to go there. So together with the Ukraine and Moldova, as well as the Eastern European Partnership countries, we're going to go and enter the EU.
So do you think there are no obstacles?
No, only the obstacle which we are having right now, it's Russia and Russian involvement in our country. Anything rather than Russia, we are having no political issues. Even the ruling party right now is pro-European. So nobody can be pro-Russian in Georgia right now.
Allah, this is why there are some people of older generations that are still alive that still kind of fondly remember the Soviet Union, the times of the Soviet Union, because they were comfortable then. Because what they remember is that they didn't have much money, they didn't have lavish lifestyles, but they had comfortable, more or less, lifestyles. And what they remember is that after that happened, in the 90s, it was horrendous. The 90s were horrendous. We had no electricity, no running water for most of the day, no gas for most of the day. What they would do is they would give us a timetable. They would say, during these times, on a given day, you will have gas, so cook. During these times, you will have running water, so fill up on water. We had these lamps, kerosene lamps. Every family had these kerosene lamps. That's how you read or studied. And people had nothing at all, so obviously there was a lot of aggression as well. You couldn't go outside alone at night with anything. You would get robbed. You could have gotten killed. So this is the reason I'm saying this is because I want you guys to understand the environment that we had to go through and the environment which formed our psychology as a nation in the near past and why we're so anxious about this. Because this is not some kind of theoretical danger that we're afraid of. This is a very real kind of series of events that we've already been through and we have no interest in going back to. Right now, if you go around in Tbilisi and you talk to some people, especially English-talking people, especially young people, they have quite comfortable lives. We have taxi cabs on our telephone. We take a Bolt home, then we get some food on Wolt or Glovo. We fire up Netflix and have a nice evening. But if you go out to the regions, to the villages, they're still in the 90s, very much so. Maybe they have in almost all the places gas and electricity and water, obviously. But the quality of life is still suffering there. So the modern problem in Georgia is the income inequality, because the very few that especially now are tied to this government, and especially that are tied to the Russian influence, the easy way of making money, have gone far up front and have left all of the people in the surrounding regions behind. And that, I believe, is a very big problem that we're facing right now. We lack unity because we cannot relate to each other.
The thing that worries me the most is that we tend to start protesting, and then we protest for a bit, and then the government either apologizes or it doesn't. And at a certain point, we get bored and we disperse and we don't push the envelope as far as it should for change to happen. I don't know, every time I say that I have a good feeling about this one, but it never turns out true. I do have a good feeling about this one as well, but I don't know, I guess the only way to ensure is to keep going out and keep showing our, vocalizing our opinion on what we are supposed to be doing as a people, as a nation, and as a government. And I mean, the last time we protested, they started renovating the square under the pretext that, oh, we have to renovate, it's old, but no, they just wanted to disperse the crowd, and they locked it down for like a year because then COVID happened and they couldn't do a fucking thing.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
At the time of releasing this documentary, almost exactly 1 year after the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the widespread protests against Georgian government, things have taken a turn for the worse. Led by the Georgian Dream party, Georgian parliament has just passed first reading of a controversial foreign agent law, which would require any organizations receiving more than 20% of their funding from overseas to register as foreign agent or face substantial fines. Critics have pointed out the glaring similarities to the identically named foreign agent law in Russia, which Moscow has leveraged to crack down on journalism, democratic institutions, and non-governmental organizations. These protests are escalating under the very windows of the hotel room in which these discussions were recorded, with people being pepper sprayed, tear gassed, and water cannoned down in an attempt to disperse the crowds furious in battle for their country's future. Opposing the law, President Salome Zurabishvili stated, "This law, which no one needed, does not come out of nowhere. It is something dictated by Moscow. The Georgia that sees its future in Europe will not allow anyone to take away this future. It belongs to our next generations, to all of us."